I wanted to share with you my thoughts about this recent controversy with Rachel Dolezal. I'll do my best to try and keep my comments focused. As you know, I tend to go off on tangents, as I'm doing right now. So let's try and keep this on topic. For those of you who may not know, Rachel Dolezal is a Caucasian woman who has been very active in civil rights organizations and movements, and it's come to light that she has been deceiving people about her ethnic background. She's deliberately been portraying herself as being African American when she's not. Anyway, you probably know all that. I was waiting to comment on it because I wanted to see, I wanted to hear her respond because I wanted to find out if she was delusional or not. And, now that she has responded, it's clear that she's not delusional. She does know and has always known that her ethnic background is Caucasian, and that she is aware that at the very least, she is aware that she has allowed people to see her as being something, other than how she portrays. Why this is important, I mean, she rose to prominence and became the head of the NAACP chapter in Spokane, Washington. So under the pretenses of being an African-American woman. And she makes the distinction by saying that she doesn't call herself African-American, she identifies as black, which is really obvious. She's trying to make a justification in her head between saying, well, I didn't say I'm African American, which she obviously connects with an ethnicity, but black to her is a cultural thing, and so, And, she's changed her appearance and all that. And, the truth of the matter is I think she looks very attractive in, the way that she has chosen to change her look, but she could look exactly the way she looks and still allow people to know that she was of Caucasian descent. Nobody would judge her for that. Anyway, getting off the subject again. What I want to focus on is her response. When she's been confronted with the fact that she's been deceptive, her response is, it's complicated. And, just very briefly, she's saying it's complicated. Well, the issue is not complicated. What's not complicated is that she is not of recent African descent. We're all of African descent, at some point, but she is not of recent African descent, and that is not a complicated matter. What is complicated are her feelings. And why this is important is, I've spoken about this in a few of my books. I shared in The Path of the Thunder Wizard, my first book, I shared about the struggle, the very complicated feelings I had about my own racial and spiritual identity, and how painful that was for me to identify as somebody of, Caucasian descent, because of the horrific things that Western Europeans and Anglo-Saxons have done to the world and to the planet over the past, 400 or 500 years. It's horrific. And, that was very painful for me. And I shared about that, how I came to realize that I was of Germanic descent. My last name, Denny, sounds very Celtic. And in fact, somewhere along the line, my parents, my dad's mom, thought that we were of Irish or Welsh descent. And there was this whole thing about how, my dad even said that his mom used to say they were of Welsh descent because she felt embarrassed over the likelihood that they were of Irish descent. Back in the 1800s and the 20s, the Irish were racially discriminated against very intensely. So in order to cover that up, she would say they were Welsh because Denny sounds Celtic. But the reality is that when I did the research, I found that Denny is, a mispronunciation of Danishy. And my ethnic ancestors were Norman Vikings who came in from, first from Scandinavia and then conquered parts of France, and then invaded England. So Denny is just, oh yeah, the Danish guy, the Viking. So that is very Germanic. And when I came to that understanding, it was very shocking to me. And I had to face within myself the racial shame and self-hatred that I had. I had a lot of racist thoughts against Germanic peoples. And I had bought into the false history that is still prevalent out there, that the Anglo-Saxons were these barbarous hordes who came in out of nowhere and filled in this power vacuum in England, and went and conquered these innocent tribal Celtic people who were practicing their religion. None of that is true. None of that is true. I mean, I go into that in detail in some of the books that I write. But what's interesting about that false history is it goes back to this original thought of this racial self-hatred that white people, specifically people of Germanic descent, have. And, I guess from my narcissistic perspective, I'd like to believe that if Rachel Dolezal had access to what actually happened, the history of Western Europe and what happened, during the Roman conquest and during the subsequent Roman Catholic religious conquest of Europe. And if she had the ability to know that her ethnic background stretches back to a people who were indigenous, animist, tribal, earth-loving people, if she had the ability to connect to herself on a subconscious, on an unconscious level to that history, maybe she wouldn't have felt the need to discard her identity and adopt a false one. Now, let me be clear. I don't care what cultural, genre you want to portray yourself as. I don't care. I think she's really attractive. She wants to darken her skin and, whatever she's done. I think she looks great that way. She could look that way and still be Caucasian. And it's important, what people are saying about what she's done. There's all kinds of opinions on all kinds of sides. Obviously, you're going to have the idiot racists who are going to say stupid things about her as a race traitor or whatever. And then you've got people who are saying things like, listen, you can't choose to be black like you can change your earrings, And let's flip it just for a second. I mean, if this were 100 years ago or 200 years ago, imagine how many African slaves would have been more than happy to just simply make the choice to choose to be culturally European in order to avoid being slaves. They didn't have that option. So the whole idea of the NAACP is about dealing with the racism that is rooted in discrimination against genetic DNA ethnic origins. So for her to just choose to be black when it's convenient in a time where, things are much more racially tolerant, is very cavalier, and it definitely dismisses, what the NAACP is all about. And as many people have pointed out, she could have done exactly what she's doing now and still be white. There's no reason for her to do that. So the complicated feelings that she has is about her own self-hatred, about her own ethnic background. And I think it's sad and unnecessary, but I'm really glad that it's here because it's giving me an opportunity. I don't want to take too much time here in this video. Maybe I'll make other videos to talk about it. But if we understood what happened to Europe, 2,000 years ago and in the Middle Ages, if we understood what happened on a racial, on a religious, on a cultural, the Holocaust that happened to indigenous Europeans, we would understand what racism is about. And I'll end this with this thought here. If you want to understand what white supremacist racism is rooted in, you have to look at the history of what happened to indigenous Europeans. and I hesitate going into it because I may end up sounding like a white supremacist, which I am not. But racism is the flip side of Rachel Dolezal. When confronted with people's self-hatred about their own ethnic or cultural background, there are two extreme choices. One is to do what Rachel is doing, to completely discard her ethnic identity and portray herself as something else so that she can fit in with the crowd with whom she emotionally feels connected to. The other side is to be very reactive and to become overly defensive about one's racial background, and that's racism. And, you know, white supremacists are people who are incredibly insecure about their own racial background. And, you know, maybe they've got other problems, who knows what, but it obviously comes from very deep sense of self-hatred and shame. And so I want to bring this out because it's incredibly important, and I'll stop here. I'll make some other videos, but that's what I wanted to point out. I think that, you know, Rachel epitomizes a lot of what's happening, what I experienced, and what I see. And I've written about it in books. Shamanism for White People. I talk about how white people appropriate Native American religion falsely. And even in the face of Native Americans who are saying, don't appropriate our religion, they do it anyway. But it's coming out of this racial self-hatred. And if people understood, you want to be an earth-loving tribal person, guess what? Your ancestors were earth-loving tribal people. You want to be a neo-shaman, you want to travel out of body, you want to you want to drum, you want to do all these things that we connect with either Siberians or Native Americans or Africans or whomever. And I've studied in a lot of those things. Guess what? Our ancestors did all that stuff too. But the church wiped it out of history. So you can connect with whomever you want, but you don't have to throw away who you are. You want to be that? Be that. Just go back far enough in your own history. So that's what a lot of my books are about. Path of the Thunder Wizard, Shamanism for White People, Awakening Sleipnir, Mounting Sleipnir. All of these things are about helping those who choose to, without becoming a racist or without, you know, hating yourself, tapping into your own ethnic and religious heritage and right as a tribal, earth-loving person. So with that, I'll shut up.